Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Good evening. Have a seat. There's a chair here which you can use, or back there. Yep, either way is fine. Welcome.
Swamiji, head is getting cut off.
Oh, really? Okay. Okay.
We should put it in.
The headless Swami. Appropriate for Halloween.
Okay. You're in orange too.
I'm in orange, see?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, okay.
All right, well, today, the topic is an interesting one. I think that one is one that's close to many people's hearts, people who are born and raised in the US as Indians, as Hindus. And so I'd like to hear from you as well. The topic is A Tale of Two Hinduisms. And before I reveal what these two Hinduisms are, I thought I would start with a question. I don't want to go off the rails here with this, so let's keep it succinct. But how many of you consider yourselves Hindu? Raise your hand. Oh, everybody in the room. Okay, look, that's useful. Okay, so now, here's the question. You were born and raised here, right? Okay, you've got non-Indian friends, obviously. I hope. Okay. So, if a non-Indian friend were to ask you, Aman, you're Hindu, right? You say, yeah. What's Hinduism? How do you respond to that question?
Everybody's conception is that Hinduism is a polytheistic religion. That's what they've learned from the textbook class and history class.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first thing that I say to them is that I clear that misconception.
Okay.
And even before you've given your kind of lecture on that Hinduism is not polytheistic, I've always held this kind of thing that don't think of it as this multiple gods, because that's what everybody feels, and that somehow invalidates the whole religion for everybody.
It sounds stupid or something.
It sounds stupid. It sounds like something
or primitive. Yeah.
Primitive, exactly. And
so what's the correct conception?
That it's one God manifested in different kind of avatars, depending on what kind of suits kind of your need or whatever you relate to. So that's what I say to people. That's the first thing.
Cool. Yeah.
I want to contradict with what Aman said, because saying that it's not polytheistic is kind of like being ashamed of what we actually are, or
no, but are we polytheistic?
No, but trying to fit into the Abrahamic thing that I feel like maybe we shouldn't do that. If it's polytheistic, it's okay. Why
yeah, but are we?
Why are we fitting into Abrahamic?
The common Hindus probably don't see that, we have one God. They see multiple gods in different ways. I believe Shiva and Vishnu equally, and I see them as two individual gods with their families, and I see all these gods. Yeah. I embrace it. I feel
okay, this is a very interesting question. So this is good. This is the purpose of discussion, right? The question is what you just explained. Is that polytheism? You said I believe in Vishnu. I also believe in, what'd you say, Shiva?
Yeah.
Okay, do you?
Yes.
So, but he's not calling it polytheism and you are.
Yeah.
So what's the, see, you agree actually.
Yeah.
Because he said, notice, one divine manifesting in multiple forms. One form would be Vishnu, one form would be Shiva, another form could be Ganesha, another one could be Christ, another one could be, right?
Yeah. But then trying to say, there is only one true God is again trying to fit it into a kind of Abrahamic religion.
I see, but again, you should be careful. I think we should be careful about, let's try to understand what he's saying. Is he saying that there's only one God and all the other gods are either not true or inferior? No, that's right. There's one infinite God who manifests to us in different ways out of love, because we like to think of God in different ways, right?
Yeah.
So that one infinite God will manifest as Christ to Christians. The same infinite God will manifest as Allah to Muslims. The same infinite God will manifest as Krishna to Vaishnavas, and so on.
But I won't say that it's, when I tell them, I don't say it's monotheistic either, because then that fits their concept of monotheism.
Right.
So I don't say monotheistic.
Good. Okay, this is really helpful, and I'm gonna, I came up with a term for it. I'll get to it in a second when we talk about it. But this is very good for anyone else want to take a stab at if a non-Hindu were to ask you what is Hinduism,
I think it's superficially it seems like polytheism, but once you get into the core tenets of Hinduism, it's more of a one God manifested in multiple.
Yeah, which is exactly what he's saying. So I think part of the reason why the way you're pitching it is useful is because so many people have misconceptions about Hinduism, and they use it as a way to dismiss the religion and show the superiority of Abrahamic religions over, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but like why is it necessary for God to be only in one form to be actually relevant?
No, but that's the point. But what he's saying, I don't think, but we can ask him, but he's not saying that God has to be in one form. There's one God in infinite forms.
Like there was a statement that like they may see that as like something, they may dismiss it, or
They do dismiss it.
Yeah. So they may see it
Right.
that is not a good, like it was not.
No, but that's not. Oh, I see. The thing is, I don't think the reason for saying that Hinduism is not polytheism is that that's the truth, or at least that's what many people believe. Do you see what I mean? And I get what you're saying. You're saying, well, just because it's not popular or because some people don't like it, why should we? But the question is Hinduism polytheistic? That's the question. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's we can talk about that. That can be one of the kind of guiding questions here. Yeah, I mean, you can already imagine that my answer is going to be no, and I'll explain why. But it's a no that nonetheless accommodates countless forms of the divine, and putting them on an equal footing, and not saying one is greater than the other. And that's the idea.
Yeah.
Polytheism. The thing about polytheism is that the strict definition would be the belief in multiple highest divines. Do you see what I mean? With equal power, and so independent of each other, and so that doesn't seem to be true of the Hindu scriptures. So if you look at the Hindu scriptures, what you'll find, like Sri Ramakrishna, for instance, used the analogy of an infinite ocean of Satchit Ananda. And he said that ocean will form, he says, under the cooling influence of the gentle breeze of bhakti, devotion. That ocean forms into different shapes of ice in different places. One form of ice will be Ganesha, another will be Vishnu, another one will be Allah. And so, well, Allah can't be have form, but anyway, we'll melt him back. But anyway, but all these different Kali and so on, right? But there's only one ocean, one infinite ocean, but countless waves, or you can say waves or ice formations, whatever you want to think. So that's the idea. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, but we'll talk about that more later. Anyone else though want to take a stab at what is Hinduism? Answering that question. So, did you give an answer? You no.
No, I gave the.
You agreed with him. Yeah. Anyone else? No. We can start. So, okay. I start with an incident. A few years ago, I went to Boston College to give. I was a guest lecturer in a graduate seminar on comparative theology. So I gave a talk, and it was we had a really interesting discussion. It was very good. In the afternoon, the same professor invited me to her introduction to Hinduism class, and it was the first day of the semester. It just happened to be the first day of the semester, and she invited me to sit in on the class, and so I sat in. And she is a Catholic professor, very renowned Catholic professor, who does her specialization is comparative theology, but she does work on Hinduism also. So she puts up these PowerPoint slides, and the first slide is the Purusha Suktam, and the famous passage about
the head of the.
Yeah, exactly, the caste system. And so she says Hinduism. This is the way she introduces Hinduism to this room full of impressionable undergraduate students at Boston College, and it's not just religious studies majors, but it's all majors. It's a required thing. And she goes, Hinduism is based on the caste system, and then she goes on to explain that the caste system is hereditary, and that it's the source of all sorts of persecution and oppression and blah blah blah. Do you see? That's why I think it's so useful or important to kind of challenge misconceptions about. You know what I mean? And this is another one of the classic caricatures or misconceptions about Hinduism.
Did you challenge her while she was saying it?
And wait for it. So so then I raise my hand and I say, well, if you look at the Bhagavad Gita, and I mentioned this quote, Chaturvarnya Maya system, Guna Karma Vibhagasha, which means Krishna says, I created the caste system, the Varna system, based on guna and karma, your innate qualities and how you behave in the world. I said, there's no mention of heredity in that scripture, and nor is there mention of it in the Purusha Suktam. Even in that from the Vedas, you don't see mention of the heredity. I grant it. I say it's true that the current caste system is hereditary, and it is responsible for all sorts of social ills, and nobody is should be defending that. But if you look at the scriptures, the original Hindu scriptures, you're going to find a caste system based on innate qualities and on behavior rather than on heredity. And we got in this really awkward fight in the middle of, class, in front of all these students. And this professor goes, well, that's not true because she said that she has like South Indian like neighbors who are still obsessed with the caste system because they only want to marry off their kids to kids in the same caste. And I was like, yeah, that's true that there are some people who still, I'm not denying that. But first of all, and then I said, look, but that's not essential to Hinduism. That was the main claim I was making, is that to claim that the hereditary caste system is somehow central to Hinduism is absurd. Hinduism is based on certain spiritual doctrines, and caste system is kind of optional. Really. So anyway, then it got even more heated. Oh, actually, this is all being recorded. But anyway, I guess. So there's a teaching assistant who lived in India for some time. He's a PhD student under her, writing his thesis, his PhD doctoral dissertation on the Dalits, on Dalit theology. So the outcasts in India and how they've been persecuted and this and that. And he's a Christian missionary basically. And so in India he was trying to convert these Dalits to Christianity and saying that, see, your own religion is mistreating you and you should join our fold. And so he became very agitated and upset and started saying, I see the persecution firsthand. And I said, I'm not denying that there's still, caste persecution and those kinds of things. And then I reiterated what my main points were. And it got very awkward, and the students were really enjoying it. It was like a Wimbledon, so they weren't expecting it. So anyway, that's just one way of. It's troubling the way that Hinduism is typically portrayed at all levels, whether we're talking about academia, whether we're talking about mainstream media. Look at New York Times. Do they ever publish any positive articles on India or Hinduism? No. And when they write about Hinduism, it's usually Bangladeshi Muslim authors writing things against the Hindus. It gets very weird. So there seems to be a very strong bias against Hinduism for various reasons. I'll give you more examples, like even from USC, like I'm not naming names here, but I had this, I suggested a topic about a year and a half or two years ago, and the topic was, I suggested, what is Hinduism? And the person in charge of making the flyer, he cringed at the word Hinduism, and he changed it to, what is Sanatana Dharma? Yeah, he knows. So, and it struck me, it's like even this young kids, this young generation of Hindus who are going to college, many of them are embarrassed or afraid or ashamed to call themselves Hindu. What a tragedy. What a sad state of affairs. And I've heard this from multiple people. Another young woman told me that she doesn't like calling herself, when people ask her what her religion, she doesn't like to say she's Hindu. And what she said was, her explanation is that many people think that the moment you say Hindu, they equate it with Hindutva, with right-wing Hindu nationalism. And then they think you're a fascist, and they'll align you with Trump and Modi, and whether or not, I'm not saying Modi's bad, but I'm just saying these are the ways. There are so many ways that people caricature Hinduism and misinterpret it. In fact, there are these. Do you guys know what the 3 C's and the 3 P's are? These are 2 of the main ways that Hinduism is caricatured. The 3 P's are poverty, population, and polytheism. And then the 3 C's are. Can you guess the 3 C's? Caste is one of them. Caste, curry, and wait for it, cows. Caste, curry, and cows. So poverty, population, and polytheism, caste, curry, and cows. But honestly, this is, I wish I could say this is an exaggeration, but often that's what people hear. When you say Hinduism, they think about these things. We saw the way that it became an issue here, right? When the Pahalgam massacre happened, the way that the news media covered it, the way that even students here reacted to it. It's all very disturbing. So I think it's extremely urgent for us as Hindus to, first of all, have a clear understanding of what it means to be Hindu. Secondly, if we're Hindu, we should be proud Hindus. We shouldn't be embarrassed or shy to call ourselves Hindu. If we're, only say we're Hindu in a safe space, or no, this is crazy. But let's be able to articulate to others what Hinduism is in a compelling and powerful way. So that's part of the point of this this discussion today. So let me give you a sense of my own background. You probably already know this, but I was born and raised in Boston in a Hindu family. But I would call the kind of Hinduism that I was raised in a kind of cultural Hinduism. What do I mean by that? What I mean is nobody ever explained to me the spiritual principles of Hinduism, but they would bring me to these pujas a few times a year. Because I was in the Bengali community, Durga Puja, Saraswati Puja, I think one other maybe, something like that. And I'd go for a couple minutes, see the waving of the lamps, put my textbooks at the feet of Ma Saraswati, as they instructed me, and then I would leave because I wouldn't watch the puja because it just seemed all very superstitious, idol worship and this and that. And then I would play football outside with my friends, and then go in for khichdi, delicious puja fare, and then come out again and just hang out with my friends, right? And so that was Hinduism to me. And the only other thing about Hinduism that I saw was my mother would do puja twice a day in her own shrine. She's been doing that for like 60, 70 years. Every morning, every evening. And so I saw that. I never participated. She never asked me to participate. And now, of course, I have great respect that she has done that for so many years. At the time, I respected her for doing that, for having that kind of faith and that commitment. But I was very skeptical and agnostic from a pretty young age.
But you believe in God?
No. I believe in God up till the age of like 6 or 7 or something. I can't remember exactly when, but then I just started being agnostic. So I was more of an agnostic, and I'm a budding philosopher, right? And as a budding philosopher, I felt just because I'm born into a religion doesn't mean I should accept it, because that's not rational. There are other people born into 100 other religions, and so why should they accept it? So I want to accept a religion because I think it's true, right? That's how I felt. And if it's true, it should directly affect my life. It should change the way I live my life, and so on. That's the way I was thinking about these things. So it shouldn't just be 3 times a year you wave a lamp at a statue. There's got to be something more to it. This is the way I was thinking. Okay. So I'm this young teenage agnostic. I go to college, Berkeley, and then I spend a year at Oxford, and that's where I really start becoming spiritually hungry. And I start reading around in the world's religious scriptures. So I start reading the Bible, Dhammapada, which is a Buddhist scripture, Bhagavad Gita in translation. I learned Sanskrit later. Parts of the Quran. So different religions, to get a sense of what the different religions were. And I'm still agnostic. And the Gita really captivated me. And that's when I first started understanding the deeper underlying spiritual principles at the basis of Hinduism, basically. What spiritual Hinduism is. So these are the 2 kinds of Hinduism that I'm contrasting. Cultural Hinduism and spiritual Hinduism. Okay. And so I grew up a kind of cultural Hindu. I had to kind of figure out what spiritual Hinduism was on my own, from my own study of the Bhagavad Gita, and then much later I came across other texts. I'll mention a few of them, and if you have time and interest, you can look at some of them. One is Swami Vivekananda's paper on Hinduism. He spoke at the World's Parliament of Religions in Chicago in 1893, and this is the second address he gave. Paper on Hinduism. It's a really nice paper. Another one is Sri Aurobindo has a really nice passage where he just poses the question, what is Hinduism? And then he explains beautifully what Hinduism is. It's in a book called A Defense of Indian Culture, where he's actually responding to a Western caricature of Hinduism, a guy named Archer, William Archer, something like that. He was writing an attack on Hinduism, and then he responded. And then there's a whole book which I would recommend. And it's called Fundamentals of Hinduism, and it's written by Satish Chandra Chatterjee, Chatterjee, and it's available on archive.org because it's in the public domain, so you can find it. So Satish Chandra Chatterjee's Fundamentals of Hinduism, and so the spiritual Hinduism that I'm going to talk to you guys about today is based on my own understanding and then also informed by these sources. Okay. So this is, I know you guys aren't parents yet, presumably, but I think it's really important for Hindu parents to learn how to teach Hinduism to their children, at least in a basic way. You don't have to teach it in like a very scholarly or like deep way, but at least like the basics, you know, so that the kids don't come away feeling like I did, like let down or like, what the heck are you guys doing? Yeah.
Do you think it's any different in India though, or you think
No, I think it's
right?
actually pretty similar. Yeah, I think it's pretty similar. Right, that's a good question. Yeah, maybe I thought it would be different until I actually moved there. And then I mean, I lived there for 13 years, and I found that it's more or less the same there as well.
Do you guys agree, by the way? For you?
I think it's different in Indian rural settings, where even though the parents might not have like the ultimate knowledge of Hinduism, but at least they try to impose whatever they have learned, at least by superstition or at least by fear and faith, to their children.
But okay, but how is that different from my parents saying, "Hey, it's Saraswati Puja, so take your textbooks because you're gonna, so she's gonna help you get better grades on your exam." Like, I'm still calling that cultural Hinduism. Do you see
I
what
think probably the frequency in which they did other like festivals in a year.
I see.
Probably once or twice a year might not make a major impact. But
Well, the more frequently, the more disgusted I would become. I'm serious. I'm not kidding. Because again, I want explanations because I just see, once I get the explanation, I'm happy to go to 100 pujas. Without the explanation, I don't want to go to any pujas. Dude, that's the way my mind works.
But
Each person will have a different temperament.
yeah,
But
not a lot of people
that's-
have read the Bhagavad Gita or know what the core of Hinduism is. It's like, yeah, we do pujas every day.
But they should. I really think parents should know, and they should be able to convey it succinctly to their children in a way that a 5-year-old can understand. That's my feeling. So that's part of the point of this. So when you become parents, and just so that you can you know, tell your coworkers at work what Hinduism is in a way that won't make them laugh. Okay, so one thing here, the term Hinduism, as we all know, of course, this is not a native Indian term. It refers to the Indus River, and that it's the people living on the other side of the Indus River, right? Okay, and some people freak out when they hear Hinduism. Like I gave a version of this talk in our Hollywood ashrama a few months ago, and one person was furious that I was using the word Hinduism, and you should use Sanatana Dharma. It's like our USC organizer here. Look, think about the word queer. Queer started as a pejorative. It was an insult to homosexuals, right? Now homosexuals themselves have appropriated the term as a term of pride, right? They call themselves queer. Okay, now I see no problem with, even if the term Hinduism is not native, it's not a native Sanskrit term, and it's given, you know, so what? Make it our own. The thing is, it's stuck. I mean, it's known. It's a common term. Now, if we start using a different term, imagine using the word Sanatana Dharma to your white coworkers. Like, what the heck? Like, what are you talking about? Is this some new religion? How is that different from Hinduism? It's going to create unnecessary questions. I don't see the point. Yeah.
It's very similar to there's a Bollywood versus Hindi cinema kind of debate, because Bollywood was used by some author in the US to refer to it as a kind of like
in a pejorative way.
In a pejorative
See,
way.
yeah, some people will and have. I mean, that's true. But does that mean that we shouldn't use it? So let me quote to you something that Swami Medhananda said a long time ago. He said, "We are Hindus. I do not use the word Hindu in any bad sense at all, nor do I agree with those that think there is any bad meaning in it. In old times, it simply meant people who lived on the other side of the Indus. Today, a good many among those who hate us may have put a bad interpretation upon it, but names are nothing." So this is my position. So think about it. You don't have to agree, but this is my position on it. And I think because it's already so widespread and you know, I think it's strategic also to use the term. Not that it matters. It doesn't matter ultimately. I mean, as long as you believe in the principles of Hinduism, that's what matters. That's what makes you a Hindu. But yeah.
Actually, in India, Sanatana Dharma is also like connected with Hindutva, and they're like, oh, you guys are trying to change
Right.
the.
So that's the thing, is that they'll,
So
whatever
either
term you
way-
come up with, they're going to start attacking that
Either way,
anyway.
they're
So then
attacking.
what's, yeah. So like, instead of, yeah. We don't have to tiptoe, you know? I mean, use a term and then explain it in the right way. So, okay, so here's, for the rest of the discussion, I want to make a case for these two Hinduisms. Okay, cultural Hinduism. I actually like stop my, I was talking about how my own, right, journey and whatever, so I stopped halfway through.
Came from
Berkeley, Oxford, and then, challenging my Christian friend, I remember, and this and that. And finally, what happens? I'm still an agnostic. I'm an agnostic spiritual seeker. Then I joined grad school at Berkeley, and within one semester, I just knew I would finish my PhD, move to India, and become a monk. And I had not read, I was still an agnostic. I still had not read one word of either Ramakrishna or Vivekananda, which is the tradition I now belong to. But from Gita, based on the Gita and my own, inner calling, or whatever you want to call it. Because in the Gita, I really liked, I ignored the stuff on bhakti and God and all that, but I loved this idea of realizing our true self, or the eternal Atman, separate from the body-mind complex, through renunciation of worldly attachments and worldly desires, basically. That's what really appealed to me. And that's what made me want to move to India and be a monk. And then, during my PhD, I also started reading, I read almost the whole complete works of Swami Medhananda and Sri Ramakrishna's teachings, and other great saints like Ramana Maharshi and others. And my ideas about spiritual life became clear, monastic life became clear. And then, got my PhD, 2009, got initiated. I received an initiation from Swami Swahanandaji, who was the previous head of the Hollywood Center. And then I moved to India. I got a one-way ticket and I moved to India. And I was in India as a monk for 13 years. And yeah, it was like more or less right before my initiation that I started believing in God. I don't know how it happened, but it just came. And now I'm fully a bhakta and everything, but it was a long journey for me. And in between, so the period between agnosticism, when I was an agnostic spiritual seeker, and now I'm a pure bhakta, there's a middle period when I could only, I loved Shankara. Shankara's Advaita Vedanta. So I credit Shankara for having woken me up from my agnostic slumber. Like he's the one who shook me out of that agnosticism. Because I felt like believing in a personal God was not rational, or somehow I couldn't stomach it at the time. But Shankara's idea of Advaita Vedanta, that it's non-dual pure consciousness, it's our true nature, the world's unreal, you don't have to believe in any kind of anything outside of you, and blah, blah, blah. So that really appealed to me at the time. It was very intellectually appealing, it was very spiritually satisfying. So my spiritual journey has moved through these three phases. Or four. I started as a young kid being turned off by what I call cultural Hinduism. That made me, the result was I became an agnostic spiritual seeker. That's the second phase. Third phase, I fall head over heels in love with Shankara's Advaita Vedanta. Fourth phase is where I am now, which I call Sri Ramakrishna's Vijnana Vedanta, and I'll give you a sense of what the core doctrines of this is. But let's one step at a time. So, here it is. Here are these two Hinduisms. There's cultural Hinduism and there's spiritual Hinduism. Now, as far as I'm aware, these are the terms that I use. Like, I don't know if other people use these terms. One thing I want to add immediately is that we can apply the same terms to every religion. There's a cultural Christianity and a spiritual Christianity. There's a cultural Islam, there's a spiritual Islam. And you could do it, spiritual Judaism and a cultural Judaism. All the bar mitzvahs and whatnot, you could do that in a very cultural way, or you can actually understand the spiritual significance, and you know what I mean? So it's true across the board. Kierkegaard, have any of you heard of the Christian thinker Kierkegaard, Søren Kierkegaard? No, okay. Kierkegaard, he's a great Danish philosopher and Christian theologian. He was scathing about basically what he saw as cultural Christianity. And he said that people go to church to meet their future spouse and to socialize, but they don't go for God. He says only a tiny minority of Christians are really Christian in the real sense. And so the same thing can be said in the Gita. We have that famous verse, right? Manushanam sahasreshu kaschidati, which is among hundreds of thousands of people, only a few strive after perfection. Okay, so now I want to share with you. I really think this is an amazing passage that I'm glad I discovered fairly recently. From a 1910 letter written by Sri Aurobindo to his brother Biren, okay, about Hinduism. Here's what he says, and I bet none of you have heard of this, but I can share the reference with you later. There are two Hinduisms. One which takes its stand on the kitchen and seeks its paradise by cleaning the body. Another which seeks God not through the cooking pot and the social convention, but in the soul. The latter is also Hinduism, and it is a good deal older and more enduring than the other. It is the Hinduism of Bhishma and Sri Krishna, of Shankara and Chaitanya, the Hinduism which exceeds Hindustan meaning India, was from of old and will be forever, because it grows eternally through the eons. Its watchword is not Kriya, but Karma. Not Shastra, but Jnanam. Sorry, these are Sanskrit, I'll explain them. Not Achar, but Bhakti. Yet it accepts Kriya, Shastra, and Achar not as ends to be followed for their own sake, but as means to perfect Karma, Jnanam, and Bhakti. Okay, so what's he saying here? And then there's a next paragraph which I'll read in a second, but let's first understand what he's saying here. Sri Aurobindo is saying he's distinguishing two kinds of Hinduism. He doesn't use these terms, but I would say that one kind is cultural Hinduism. Swami Medhananda used to say, at that time, imagine, this is 1890s, he said, religion has moved into the kitchen. Because he was seeing that most of these Hindus are obsessing about, being uchishta, what kind of food to eat, what food not to eat, and don't do this. It's all about these don't touchisms and this and that. And he said, people are going to go mad doing this. What about the deeper spiritual principles? Okay, so that's cultural Hinduism on the one hand. And then I think he's contrasting that with spiritual Hinduism. Okay, the spiritual principles of Hinduism, which is true Hinduism. And he's pointing out that is the true and the original Hinduism, and that the cultural Hinduism is that's something that changes from age to age, and it's non-essential. Okay. Now, the terms he's using, just to clarify. So, how does he explain spiritual Hinduism as distinct from cultural Hinduism? He says its watchword is not Kriya, but Karma. Kriya just means mechanical rituals, basically. I mean, in the sense that he's using it clearly. And then Karma, he's saying, is something more like, in the context of Karma Yoga, you're doing something, and you're doing it as an offering to the divine, and thereby purifying your mind, so you're doing it as a spiritual practice. You're doing it mindfully and as a spiritual practice. Not Shastra, but Jnanam. Okay. Shastra means literally scripture. Now, he's not criticizing scriptures, and he's not saying that scriptures fall on the side of cultural Hinduism. He's saying people who are scriptural fundamentalists, people who, still now in India, you'll find Brahmins who will just rattle off memorize Sanskrit verses without understanding anything that they're saying, right? But then they'll be Vedic fundamentalists in the sense that they'll be very fanatical about the Vedas and this and that, but without knowing anything about the deeper spiritual principles of the Vedas and so on. So I think that's what he has in mind, is a kind of scriptural fundamentalism about the Vedas. Not Shastra, but Jnanam. Jnanam just actually means spiritual knowledge or spiritual realization. So the scriptures are wonderful as long as you take them as means to the end of spiritual realization. God realization or self-realization. That's the purpose of the scriptures. Okay, and that's what spiritual Hinduism is about. And then not achar, but bhakti. And achar is about again, these kind of like observances, basically. Different things, like, what are some examples? Oh, don't eat beef. You can think of, I was given a hard time by a monk in India because I'm a lefty. Oh, yeah, see, okay, good. And so he's like, why do you write with your left hand? I was like, I was born with I'm a lefty. What's the big deal? No, it's not good. Give me a break, sorry. So anyway, so that's example of achar, okay? Not achar, but bhakti. So achar falls on the side of cultural Hinduism. Left-handed is bad. And bhakti means have devotion, longing for God. That's what really matters in spiritual Hinduism. Okay, so, and then he adds something really important. Because remember, I was being critical of the Saraswati Puja and this and that. You might think that I'm saying, so do I go to puja now? Of course I go to puja now. But now that I know the spiritual basis, so I think that's also what Sri Aurobindo is saying. He's saying, yet it accepts Kriya, Shastra, and Achar. Those are the three terms that he was criticizing before, that falls on the side of cultural Hinduism. He says, spiritual Hinduism accepts these three things, not as ends to be followed for their own sake, but as means to perfect karma, jnana, and bhakti. Which means what? We can do puja to our heart's content. We can read 100 scriptures. We can all that. We can be vegetarian if we want to. That's another achar. That's another observance and all that. As long as we understand the deeper spiritual rationale for what we're doing. So what do the lamps signify when we're waving them in front of the deity? What is the image? What is the relationship between the image and the deity? Why am I putting textbooks at her feet? Should I be putting textbooks at her feet? And, I mean, these kinds of questions. Can you answer those questions? Do you see what I mean? And is there one God or are there multiple gods? Is that polytheism versus monotheism versus monism question? We'll get to that in a second as well. Okay, so yeah.
At any point in India's historical history, do you think the spiritual side has held preference over the cultural side? In
It's
the
a good question.
Like the everyday household.
Maybe in the Satya Yuga. You know how in Hinduism we have these different yugas, and we're in the worst possible age, supposedly, Kali Yuga. So maybe in the Satya Yuga, which is the best of all the ages, maybe the Hindus were primarily spiritually Hindu. But I don't know, that's a speculation.
Are you classifying the two sides as tradition versus based on actual text?
I hope not, because I don't even know what the distinction is.
So are you saying that the cultural side is more of the traditions and
No, because let me just let me keep going, because I hope you'll see. If you still have the question after a little bit, just re-ask it. But I hope what I say will answer that. Okay, so now, but the key point that Sri Aurobindo is making is that all of these practices are wonderful as long as they're understood as means to the end of spiritual realization, rather than as ends in themselves, or rather than as just mechanical rituals or things I do because that's what a Hindu should do, which is how most Hindus think. If you ask them why you don't eat beef, what will they say? Cows are holy or something? I mean, it's most of them won't have a very good answer. Okay, and why are you distinguishing cows from other animals, for instance? I think that's a serious question to ask, because all animals have souls. So why are you putting the cows on a pedestal, for instance? So these are serious questions, which I think any Hindu should be able to answer if they have strong opinions about it. Okay, now let me read you the next paragraph of the same letter of Sri Aurobindo's. So this is the first paragraph, and we have several computer scientists with us, so you'll appreciate this. We have trees. Don't you guys do trees? Okay. So under Hinduism, the first tree is cultural Hinduism and spiritual Hinduism. Now under spiritual Hinduism, we've got a subtree. Is that what you call it, a subtree? No.
Sure.
Okay, sure. Why not? Okay, subtree. Here he goes. The higher and truer Hinduism is also of two kinds. So now he's talking about spiritual Hinduism. Two kinds: sectarian and unsectarian, disruptive and synthetic. That which binds itself up in the aspect and that which seeks the all, with a capital A. The first, so sectarian spiritual, so this is how I see it. Under spiritual Hinduism, you have sectarian spiritual Hinduism and you have non-sectarian spiritual Hinduism. Okay. The first, meaning the sectarian spiritual Hinduism, is born of rajasic or tamasic attachment to an idea, an experience, an opinion or set of opinions, a temperament, an attitude, a particular guru, a chosen avatar. That's what you were also talking about in the beginning. A certain fanatical attachment to or clinging to my God who is better than your God, or more, I'm better than you are in some way. This attachment is intolerant, arrogant, proud of a little knowledge, scornful of knowledge that is not its own. It is always talking of the kusamskaras, which means bad samskaras, superstitions of others, and is blind to its own. It's criticizing others, but is blind to its own problems. Or it says, my guru is the only guru, and all others are either charlatans or inferior. Or, quote, my temperament is the right temperament, and those who do not follow my path are fools, or pedants, or insincere. Or my avatar is the real God himself, and all the others are only lesser revelations. Or my Ishta-Devatā is God, the others are only his partial manifestations. Then Sri Aurobindo says, when the soul rises higher, it follows by preference its own ideas, experiences, opinions, temperament, guru, Ishta. But it does not turn an ignorant and exclusive eye upon others. So now he's moving away from sectarian spiritual Hinduism to non-sectarian. There are many paths, it cries, and all lead equally to God. All men, even the sinner and the atheist, are my brothers in sadhana, and the beloved is drawing them each in his own way to the one without a second. So we're moving away from religious exclusivism and fanaticism to accepting different religions as different paths to the same goal. And then Sri Aurobindo says, but when the full knowledge dawns, I embrace all experiences in myself. I know all ideas to be true, all opinions useful, all experiences and attitudes means and stages in the acquisition of universal experience and completeness. All gurus, imperfect channels or incarnations of the one and only teacher, all Ishtas and avatars to be God himself. And we're moving in this, at least monistic direction. I was going to say monotheistic, but whatever term. We'll get to that in a second. Then he concludes with this, and it's close to my heart because it's my tradition. He says, that is what Ramakrishna taught by his life and sadhana. And therefore is he the avatar of the age, the one who prepares the future of humanity. So he was strongly influenced by Sri Ramakrishna. So we have the tree here, right? So we got cultural Hinduism and spiritual Hinduism, and then under spiritual Hinduism we have, I think he usefully distinguishes two different kinds of spiritual Hinduism. You'll find this if you go to India. You'll find some deeply spiritual Hindus who are also deeply fanatical. And this is true in all religions. You'll find some of the most religious Christians are also the most fanatical. Not all of them, but some of them really are. And that's true of Muslims, and it's true of... So it's just a fact. You'll find that. Their faith is deep, but narrow. It tends to be kind of narrow, right? And exclusivistic, yeah.
So is there still a belief that like people of this, like, I guess subsect are still...
Which one are we talking about? Not the sectarian spiritual Hindus?
Yeah, like,
okay.
I feel like in my family we talk about how like some of my grandparents who live in India, they're kind of like, oh, like no Muslims in the house, this, that.
Mm-hmm.
But their faith is also like runs very deep, and in their head they kind of want to do what they think is best for like their faith, and so they do it out of a perspective of like, I'm serving God in the best way I can.
Yeah.
People in this way still, I guess, reach God, or is the idea that they have a long way to go and they're not?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, there are a few things here, right? People who, like I was sitting at USC like a couple of years ago on a bench, and these Christian students approached me and tried to convert me. They gave me a brochure. And but seriously, they think I'm going to burn in hellfire unless I become Christian. So it's, and then I've heard, I mean, a lot, because I'm a monk, and so I meet a lot of devotees who are raising their kids. And sometimes their kids convert. So one recently told me that he converted, his kid suddenly, he's like a 21-year-old or something. He just converted from Hinduism to Catholicism. And that's okay. I said, why is that a problem? He said, well, because now he's trying to convert me. And because he's trying to make me feel bad about being Hindu. And so and there are a lot of cases of this, actually. But your question is, do they have a long way to go? This gets tricky.
Is it the idea that they're not as spiritually progressed, or is that still a fair belief and path towards God? Like,
I think it's still a fair path. Yeah, I think it is. And you can realize God, actually. I think that if you really come close to, when your mind is sufficiently purified, see, what is spiritual progress? It means you're diminishing ego. To the extent that your ego is reduced, to that extent, you're just going to naturally, your heart's going to expand. And you're going to be more sympathetic and open and empathetic and receptive to other traditions, to other people. So I think typically what you'll find is that these people at a certain point of spiritual evolution will grow more liberal. And that a lot of the most fanatical people tend to be pretty superficial about religion. Like it's more a matter of ego than about actual spirituality. But then there are exceptions where I see that there's somebody who is deeply spiritual and at the same time very, very narrow and kind of fundamentalist in their outlook. Yeah.
Kind of similar kind of example. I feel there's a lot of, like, when I go to say I visit the Iskon temple, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people I visit there who seem to be very deeply spiritual, but also I'm like, do they not know better? Kind of like are they a little too naive, or is, say, the example in India with converting Dalits into Christian, maybe they don't know any better kind of thing, but they still they hold in very high regard in their hearts kind of thing. Or those, like, you can still be very spiritual without, you know.
I think that's a good example. I mean, I've seen some devotees who are genuine devotees, who have a certain spiritual depth and yet are also extremely fanatical in their outlook and look down on other religions. Not just other religions. Within Hinduism, they look down on other Hindu traditions. I mean, that same tradition, the founder, Prabhupada, he called Ramakrishna and Vivekananda bogus. He kept using the word, but they're all bogus. He says anybody who does not follow the path of Chaitanya is bogus. And it's recorded in his morning walks in LA in the 70s. And they're online. You can hear them yourself. I have an article where I quote it. Okay, so now, here's what I want to do for the remainder of this. And by the way, okay, let me first say this and then okay. I want to focus now on, here's kind of like Here's how I wish that I was taught spiritual Hinduism when I was growing up. Okay, like I wish my parents or someone in my Indian community, Hindu community, had explained to me Hinduism in this way. So I'm going to focus on non-sectarian spiritual Hinduism because that's what I find most appealing and most valuable. And I would break it down into 4 core principles. Okay, so literally, if anybody were to ask you what is Hinduism, this would be my answer. 4 principles. Okay, and when I gave this talk in our Hollywood Center, I said, hey, you guys out there, if anyone, you guys should make a business card out of this and just have the 4 principles on it. 1 week later, a devotee comes in having made about like 500 business cards, really cute. I forgot to bring them, so I'll bring them. Remind me next time. I'll bring them. I'll give you each one. I have a lot of them. So it has the 4 principles of Hinduism, and it's got like a Mario Kart theme to it. So it's appealing to kids. It's kind of cute. Okay. So anyway, okay. So what do I see as the 4 main doctrines of? Remember, in this tree, it's the subtree of non-sectarian spiritual Hinduism. So the moment I start saying these doctrines, you say, yeah, but the Vaishnavas are not going to agree with this, or the so-and-so is not going to agree with it. That's true. That's my point. Those are all sectarian spiritual Hindu traditions, right? I'm giving you what I take to be. And so, if a friend asks you what is Hinduism and you start giving these narrow doctrines, that might be true about what you believe, right? But that's not going to be as universal. I'm now sketching for you what I take to be the 4 universal core spiritual principles of Hinduism. Okay, number 1, what is the nature of ultimate reality? There is one infinite, impersonal, personal, divine reality, which manifests in countless forms. You follow? One infinite, impersonal, personal, divine reality that manifests in countless forms. Okay. If you go back to our oldest scripture, it's called the Rig Veda. There's a famous mantra, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti, which means the truth is one, or the reality is one. Sages call it by various names. That is Hinduism. Now, is that polytheism? This is the question that came up earlier, right? I don't think so. Now, because polytheism means that there are multiple ultimate absolutes or divine realities, but that's not what this is saying. They're saying there's one ultimate, which manifests in countless forms, right? So the term I would like to use, and I'm just throwing this out there, and especially in an academic context, it sounds fancy, so you can impress your friends at cocktail parties. If they say, is Hinduism polytheistic? You say, no, it's not. It doesn't believe in polytheism. We Hindus we believe in polymorphic monism. Did we talk about this already?
Yeah.
Okay, so polymorphic monism. See, it's not monotheism. Okay, monotheism means theism implies a personal God, and that means you're limiting the ultimate reality only to the personal God. But remember, the Hindu conception of ultimate reality is even broader, because there's also an impersonal dimension to the infinite divine. Advaita Vedanta is based on the impersonal, right? So it has to accept both. So that's why I use monism rather than monotheism. Monism is the one infinite, impersonal, personal divine. Polymorphic, because morph means form. Poly means a lot, many. So many forms. The one infinite divine manifesting in countless forms. Polymorphic monism. This to me is the most technical way to explain, and it's very kind of intuitive too. I don't think it's that complicated either, right? Polymorphic monism, in my opinion, is the best way to explain the Hindu view of ultimate reality. And under the rubric of polymorphic monism, you can explain, hey, I mean, if you're telling your Christian friend or someone, you can say, hey, one of the great things about Hinduism is that in a single Hindu family, the mom might be a Ganesha worshiper, the dad might be a Kali worshiper, the kid might be an Advaitin, but we're all Hindus. How is that possible? Because of this Hindu doctrine of Ishta-Devatā. I think in any explanation of Hinduism, you have to bring in this idea of Ishta-Devatā. It's one of the great selling points of our religion, in my opinion. Ishta-Devatā. It means you can worship God and think of God however you like. And nobody will judge you for it. Nobody's going to tell you it's lower or lesser than some other form of God. No, they're all equal. That's, I think, what you were getting at in the beginning.
Yeah.
But that's not polytheism. This is polymorphic monism.
Got it now.
Right? Okay, now you get it. So that's it. Right? It's amazing. It means that Hinduism is not a one-size-fits-all religion. You know, tough luck if you don't like my Krishna or my Christ or my Allah. No. That's the beauty of it. I see Hinduism less as a religion and more as a meta-religion. It's more of a kind of universal spiritual philosophy that gives the underlying spiritual principles for all the religions, actually. You know, it's so universal if you understand it in that broad. Did you have a question?
Yeah, so I guess by that idea, you could be Hindu and your Ishta-Devatā could be Allah then, or Christ?
Of course, yeah. In fact, in our tradition, our gurus in the West, at least, are given multiple mantras. Some of them are non-Hindu, so we have a Christ mantra, we have an Allah mantra. So for people who, if the guru deems that person, if they feel that the disciple is drawn toward Christ, they might give them the Christ mantra instead of a Hindu mantra. But not, I don't say instead of a Hindu mantra, but that's still Hindu, right? That's the beauty of it, actually. It's still Vedantic. It's still under the rubric of Vedanta, but you can embrace Christ. You can embrace it. We have Muslim sadhus and Christian sadhus in our order, for instance. Okay. Okay. So first principle. I want you guys to memorize these, and then I'll give you the business cards. Okay. First principle, I've explained the nature of ultimate reality. Okay. Second principle. Where does that leave us? And how are we related to God? That's what the second principle is about. Each one of us is intimately connected to that infinite divine reality. Notice the language I used here. It's deliberately open-ended and cagey. Intimately connected to. I didn't say identical with. I didn't say one with. Why? Because I want to be broad here. And there are multiple ways, equally true, of understanding our intimate connection with God, with the divine. Okay? I'll give you a few examples. One is, you can feel like you're a child of God. Another, I feel like a servant of God. Another, I'm a spark of the divine fire. Another, I am absolutely identical with God. It's more like an Advaita Vedanta kind of a thing. Absolute identity. Yeah.
So, what does that exclude, though? I think it may be more instructive for us to understand what intimately related means.
What it excludes is, first of all, we're not the body-mind complex. So this is fundamental to Hinduism. We suffer most fundamentally, because we mistakenly identify with the body-mind complex.
And the body is not intimately related to God then?
Well, I mean, if you want to go, it depends on which tradition you're belonging to, but if you believe in a kind of Hindu panentheism, then there's nothing but the divine. So that's another form of the divine. But you in your deepest essence are not the physical body. It's going to drop off in a few years anyway. You're also not even the mind, but we're eternal Atman, separate from the body-mind complex. That Atman is intimately connected with the ultimate reality. That's the claim.
So there is no, say, Hinduistic conception of hedonistic conception of Hinduism that would be excluded from like the second principle of, I'm here, so might as well drink as much alcohol as I can.
Charvaka materialism. Yeah, it's called Charvaka. There's a tradition like that, but that doesn't fall under spiritual Hinduism.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like the hedonistic challenge to Hinduism. They'll literally say that the Vedas are the ravings of lunatics. These Charvaka people go really, and it's like eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. We don't have consciousness does not exist after the death of the physical body, and standard kind of hedonistic sort of principles. Yeah, so that it's these principles are meant to exclude that. Yeah. So okay. So this is really important. We're eternal souls. If you don't like the word soul, Atma, or whatever you want to use, but eternal Atman, separate from the physical body and even separate from our minds. Which means when we die, our consciousness persists. We can never die, actually. Okay. And we're intimately one with the divine. Yeah.
No modern day religion would disappear with this, I think. Right? Or the main
well, we have to be careful when we say no modern day religion, because there might be tribal religions, both in India and in Africa and other places, South America, where they may have certain beliefs that the Lord knows. I don't know. I can't say I know all the world religions. I know some of the major ones, but another thing that it excludes, because that's an interesting way of asking the question, is like, what does this principle exclude? It excludes the Christian doctrine of original sin. The idea that fundamentally we're sinners, that sin is at the root of our being. And in fact, Swami Medhananda said this in a very startling way in Chicago at the World's Parliament of Liberty. He says, it is a standing libel upon human nature to call a human being a sinner. We're not sinners, we're divine. We're divine beings in human bodies. Right? That's a fundamental difference, it seems to me. Okay.
Does it also exclude like more naturalistic understanding of like the world, or do you think it encapsulates it as well?
Yeah, so here's the thing. I don't mean to say that this excludes Christianity, for instance. You can be a Christian and also attain the realization of the divine, right? But it's crucial that we're going to get to this in the doctrine 4. So this is the second doctrine, but the fourth doctrine is about how there are many paths to the same goal. So Christianity is one path. Now, just because there are many different religions are equally effective in leading to the same goal doesn't mean that 100% of the doctrines of every religion is true. Do you see what I mean? So it might be that the Christian, through their Christian faith, will realize God, go to their Christian heaven, but then they might be in for a surprise about certain things. That's kind of the idea, is that, oh, wait a minute, actually, we're not, original sin may not be true, or, oh, wait a minute, there's rebirth, or that kind of thing. So the point is, every religion has some errors. This is also this is something that Sri Ramakrishna would often emphasize. He says, everybody thinks their own watch tells exactly the correct time and everybody else's watch is wrong. But no watch tells exactly the correct time, is the idea. So every religion has some errors, but even with the errors, it can still be an effective path. That's the way to think about it. So even a naturalist, atheist, but who's a good person, who believes in trying to be the best human being he could possibly be, he or she could possibly be, that person can also reach the highest. But when they reach the highest, they might have to revise some of their views and say, oh, wait a minute, oh, there is a God, or there, whatever. Or, oh, wait, I'm dead now, but I'm still living, as consciousness, right? Okay, so I've explained 2 out of the 4 principles. And by the way, after I get to the 4th principle, I have 2 doctrines of what I call Hinduism plus. So stay tuned for Hinduism plus. Okay, so we have a little more to cover here. 3rd of the 4 spiritual principles of non-sectarian spiritual Hinduism. Number 3, what is the goal of life? So far, we explained what is the nature of ultimate reality. It's the impersonal, personal, infinite divine manifesting in countless forms. Number 2, how are we related to that infinite divine? Each of us is intimately connected to that divine in some way. Part, whole, servant, master, absolute identity, however you want. We can look at God as our friend, as our lover, as our parent, as our child. There's so many ways. Okay. 3rd, what is the goal of life? The goal of life is to attain liberation from all suffering and to attain limitless fulfillment. Through, how do we get that? Through direct experiential knowledge of the infinite divine and our relationship with the divine. Are you following? So it directly follows, these 3 principles are linked to each other. When I have not just intellectual knowledge, I read it in a book, in the Upanishads of the Gita, and I go, oh, God is like this. No, it's a direct spiritual knowledge of that infinite divine in some form or aspect. And that I am actually one with the divine. That will give me liberation. I won't have to come back again, and I will have infinite bliss. Okay. Now, a couple things here. You might think, well, this sounds kind of one-sided, and then where does that leave us, ordinary people who have jobs, 9-to-5s, and we're raising a family, and but no. Here's another thing. Here's another misconception about Hinduism, or a kind of caricature, is that Hinduism is otherworldly, it's purely mystical, it's foofy, it's life-denying. No. There are certain traditions within Hinduism that you can accuse of being things like that. But there are traditions that are meant only for monastics, for instance, like Advaita Vedanta. Even though now it's being spread, I think wrongly, to the masses. But it shouldn't be, right? It's really meant for a monastic elite. Okay, but Hinduism is very broad. And if you go back to the classical texts, you'll find them talking about 4 stages of life.
Purushartha.
The Purushartha and the 4 values of life, right? So the 4 stages. You're a celibate student, 1st stage. 2nd stage, you're a householder. You get married, you have kids, you raise a family, you have a job. 3rd stage, vanaprastha, you dwell in a forest, you run off. Either with your wife, but then you stop all the, and you say, and you're both spiritual aspirants, full-time spiritual aspirants, and you practice austerities and spiritual practice. And then finally, culminating in the 4th and highest stage of life, which is sannyasa. Right? You renounce everything and then just live for God. And you become a full-time spiritual aspirant. And now, corresponding to these, to the scheme of the 4 stages of life are the 4 purusharthas, the 4 values in Hindu life. What are those 4 values? Dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. What I explained is the 4th one, the ultimate goal of life is liberation from all suffering, right? And the attainment of limitless fulfillment. But there are three other values: dharma, artha, and kama. Dharma means ethical living, a sort of ethical foundation for living. So don't lie to people, try to observe truth. The kind of things we were talking about, yama, niyama, last time I was here. Those kinds of things. Righteousness, yeah. Ethics, righteousness, dharma. Artha, material fulfillments. So having material aims, that's also fine. Okay? Wealth, accumulating wealth, and so on and so forth. But on the basis of dharma. So it's important that you not resort to corruption or lying and deception and blah, blah, blah. And then the third one, dharma, artha, kama. Having desires, and these are worldly desires. This is not the desire for God or the desire for moksha, but just ordinary desires. Those also, look, in so many lifetimes, we've wanted everything but God, right? And you come to these spiritual discourses now because after many lifetimes, you realize that that's not the road to ultimate fulfillment, and that there must be something beyond that, right? And so that's when we get to the fourth value, moksha, liberation. Right? But there's a place for everything. But the way that Swami Medhananda would have put it, and I think this is the right way to think about it, it's not that it's wrong. You shouldn't feel guilty. It's wrong to have worldly desires. No, it's a lower stage. It's a lower truth moving toward a higher truth. That's the idea. And it helps you because we all learn through experience. This is something I've said many times, and I'm going to say it again. You should all, by the time you leave USC, you should have memorized it. This is something from Swami Medhananda. He says, the secret of life is not enjoyment, but education through experience. That's Vedanta, that's Hinduism actually, education through experience. Now that doesn't mean just spiritual experience, that's the goal, but we don't start by having spiritual experience. We have ordinary experiences, go to the frat party, have fun, try to have fun, and then see how much fun you end up having, and then you're gonna have a hangover the next day. And then who's next to me? Sorry. but the point is you learn, and then you're like, okay, I did that. Yeah, it was kind of fun, but then it's kind of like, wait, the Gita's actually right. Remember the Gita? I think we talked about this. It's three kinds of happiness. And the Rajasika form of happiness is, it's like nectar in the beginning, but ultimately it becomes like poison. We all realize that in the end. It takes some people longer than others to realize that, but we all come to that realization.
So, like, if you're living a quote-unquote dharmic life where you're not, like, harming people and you're doing good, but you still are full of worldly attachments and desires, is the idea true that, like, you don't have to yourself try to be like, oh, I have to get rid of this, and, like, put your foot on it, but eventually you will grow to not find enjoyment in them, like, everyone.
Yeah, but if you're a sincere spiritual aspirant, but it's just, it doesn't happen automatically. It doesn't happen. That's the thing about Hinduism. It's like, if you want to stay in the world, you'll keep coming back. Because that's what you want, you know? And so if you're a sincere spiritual aspirant, and so this is another good way of thinking about it. Within Hinduism, marriage is considered to be part of spiritual life. That doesn't mean just enjoy yourselves and, you know, be romantic for the rest of your lives. No. Is that marriage itself should evolve. That itself is a spiritual journey. And I think we talked about this before, but Sri Ramakrishna would encourage household. He said, after having 1 or 2 children, try to live with your spouse like brother and sister. Which means what? The marriage needs to evolve. The relationship with your spouse, your loved one, should evolve. That's what a sincere spiritual aspirant, they'll feel that. They're not going to feel that at the age of 85 that I need to get a prescription for Viagra. That means there's something wrong with your spiritual life. I'm serious, and I'm not judging anyone, but I'm saying from a spiritual standpoint, that can't be. You need to, at that point, I think you should be evolved beyond those things, right? So that's the idea. You'll start, touchy-feely, romantic, everything. Okay, fine. Get it out of your system. And then raise the kid. You'll be very attached to your kid. And all your pranas, your life is going to that kid. And then, and then the kid's going to go to college. You're going to start learning about detachment. And you're going to be devastated at first when your kid leaves hearth and home. What am I going to do without my son Rahul or whatever? But then, you get over it, and that's part of your the mom's spiritual growth and the father's spiritual growth. And then the next hard lesson for this now elderly couple. Now let's say they're in the 70s. Now they have to prepare. One of them is going to die before the other one. And I've seen it. I've seen this because I'm a monk, and so I meet tons of devotees. I've seen these elderly devotees when one of them passes away, right? I see the whole range. Some, when their spouse of 60 years passes away, it destroys them. It just floors them. Sometimes they just go off the deep end and they start behaving crazy. They're never the same. They're in a permanent state of depression. They die early. They die shortly thereafter because they have nothing to live for. And then there's another kind of person. Literally, this happened just recently. There's somebody that my family was close to, and her husband passed away suddenly at a younger age than she was expecting. And she said, Thakur, meaning Sri Ramakrishna, she's a devotee of Sri Ramakrishna, she said, Sri Ramakrishna has decided to take him away. That's it. And no tears, you know. And so, but that's the more spiritual response, hopefully. Yeah. Well, we should strive toward that. That it might sound cold and heartless, but it's not. It's called detachment, but it's a detached love, actually, right? Because you know that he's not God. See, what are you really mourning the loss of? You're mourning the loss of the physical body, actually, and the mind associated with it. Because if you're a Hindu, you know that they live on anyway. They've just cast off this body, like a pair of clothes, like a set of clothes, like the Gita talks about in chapter 2. Vasam sijinani yataviha. If you really believe that, see, that's the funny thing. I just gave a talk yesterday in the Hollywood Temple, based on my book, the one we discussed, Karma and Rebirth in Hinduism. And I started by reciting the Gita verse 2.22. Vasam sijinani yatavihaya navani granati naroparani tatashadinani vihayaji nananyani sanyati dhamani. The embodied soul casts off one body and takes up another, just as we cast off a set of clothes at the end of a long day once it gets worn out, and we put on a new set of clothes, which is clean. If we really believe that, and it wasn't just a theoretical belief or something, that would completely change the way we look at ourselves. It would completely change the way we look at our other people. We would think about death differently, right? It's because we'll give lip service to karma and rebirth, we don't really believe them. Because if we did, we'd be like, good for you. Now you're moving on to bigger and better. And we wouldn't be afraid of dying either. That's the beauty of it. Because there's no such thing as death for the soul, for the Atman. Good riddance to this body. You know what Swami Medhananda said at the moment of his death? This was back in 1902. July 4th is when he left his body. His brother disciple named Swami Ramakrishna Order is sitting in Chennai, which is South India, Tamil Nadu. He is in Belumat in Bengal, so no phones, because that was 1902. He mystically communicates with his brother. He called him Shashi. Brother Shashi. He says, my dear brother Shashi, I have spat out my body. That was the language he used. I have spat out my body. That's the way we should feel. Okay. All right. Fourth doctrine. There are various paths to this ultimate goal. So the third doctrine was, what's the ultimate goal of life? Liberation from all suffering and liberation from rebirth. How do we attain the goal? There are many paths to the same goal. And what non-sectarian spiritual Hinduism, and in particular Vedanta, I understand Vedanta as kind of a synonym for non-sectarian spiritual Hinduism, if we understand Vedanta in the broadest possible sense. You can understand Vedanta in a narrow or sectarian way. You can say, Vedanta means Advaita Vedanta, Vedanta means Ramanuja Ishta-Devatā, Vedanta means Madhva, Vedanta means ISKCON, or whatever. I'm defining Vedanta in the broadest possible way as these four core principles, okay? Even though there are countless paths to the same goal of the direct experiential knowledge of the divine, Vedanta generalizes these paths into four basic yogas, and you all know them by now, I hope. Bhakti Yoga, the path of devotion toward a personal God. Karma Yoga, the path of selfless service. Raja Yoga, the one we talked about last week, which is the yoga of meditation and concentration. And then fourth is Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge, which is based on Shankara's Advaita Vedanta. Okay. But there's a broader way to understand some of these yogas. So Jnana Yoga, for instance. The narrow way to understand Jnana Yoga is Shankara's path. The broader way is any spiritual practice or any spiritual path that involves the mind, the rational mind, thinking, reasoning, intellectualizing, okay? And then, so the broader way of thinking about the four yogas is, Bhakti Yoga is the yoga that taps into our feelings, our heart, our emotions, the emotional side of our nature. Karma Yoga, the volitional side of our nature. Raja Yoga, our faculty of concentration. Okay, and so you can think of the different world religions as combining, or at least including one of these four yogas, at least, right? Christianity definitely has Bhakti Yoga, obviously, devotion toward love for God and all that, which is the first commandment, right, according to Christ. The highest commandment is to love God with all your heart. But it also has karma yoga, serve others. Islam, you'll find the same combination of bhakti yoga and karma yoga. Advaita Vedanta is obviously more jnana yoga. Buddhism, many forms of Buddhism are more path of knowledge, but they also have karma yoga in it. So what you can find in pretty much all the world religions is at least one of these 4 yogas. And what non-sectarian spiritual Hinduism holds in this 4th principle is that all of these paths lead to the highest goal equally effectively. There's no higher and lower. And what's the logic? Because all of these different spiritual paths, if they're genuine spiritual paths, have some elements of one or more of the 4 yogas in them. And any of these 4 yogas can take us to the highest goal. Okay. You can reach the highest goal just through karma yoga, you can reach the highest goal just through bhakti yoga, you can reach the highest goal just through jnana yoga, and so on. Or you can combine them. And in a way it helps to combine them. Why? Because the human personality is composite. We've got a heart, we also have a head, we also have a will, we also have a faculty of concentration, which is shrinking by the day thanks to social media and AI and the internet, right? Because nobody wants to read books anymore. But we still have it, thankfully, right? So each of these yogas helps to cultivate a different aspect of the human personality. Bhakti yoga, the heart; jnana yoga, the head; karma yoga, the will; raja yoga, the faculty of concentration and meditation. So when you if in your spiritual practice, in your day-to-day spiritual practice, you're able to combine the 4 yogas, or at least more than one, I would suggest, this is just a very practical thing that I've found in my own life and what I've seen from other monks, is that you make one of the 4 yogas central. So it's kind of like using particle physics as a metaphor. Keep one as the nucleus, and then you can think about the other yogas as floating around, hovering around it. So they're subordinate to it, but they're still active. Do you see what I mean? So you don't become one-sided also. You become more one-sided and you're more prone to fanaticism if you just practice one yoga, because you won't get why other people are practicing other yogas. You'll be like, that's kind of weird. Why are they doing that? Yeah. Do you have
So the nucleus has changed from jnana to bhakti yoga for you, I believe.
Yeah, for me, it's bhakti yoga and karma yoga maybe. Maybe it's a twin nuclei. I don't know how that works in particle physics, but you can have two nuclei in one. But yeah, something like. And the thing is, it's also hard to. You can't put these 4 yogas in airtight compartments, because karma yoga, the way that the Gita has 2 ways of defining karma yoga. One is in an atheistic way, but that's not actually the common way. The other is a bhakti-oriented karma yoga, which we talk about, right? Which is you offer everything to the divine. That's already the quote you gave me, right? So that's a bhakti-oriented karma yoga. That's combining both the yogas. So that's why it's a kind of fusion of bhakti yoga and karma yoga that to me is the nucleus. But each person will have their own. Figure that out for yourself, and you can. Now, Hinduism plus. Okay, but before I get to Hinduism plus, let's see how well you remember these doctrines. Gen Z. Okay. Number 1, what's the first doctrine?
Ultimate reality.
Well, what is the ultimate reality?
Personal, infinite, personal, ultimate reality.
Impersonal, personal, infinite, divine. And what's the fancy term that I use to explain Hinduism is not polytheism?
Monism.
Very good, polymorphic monism. Excellent, you guys are great. Okay, second core doctrine of spiritual Hinduism.
Intimately connected.
Each of us is intimately connected to that infinite divine in some way. Great. And why do we suffer?
To get liberated.
Huh?
To get liberated.
Well, no, why do we suffer?
Because of karma.
Yeah, and because we mistakenly identify with the body-mind complex. This is also fun. This is part of actually the second doctrine. Because we mistakenly identify with the body-mind complex, we're constantly chasing after things that will gratify either the physical body or the mind, right? That's all that, every pleasure in the world you'll find either gratifies the physical body or the mind or both at the same time, right? When we realize that if we really believe that we are eternal souls separate from the body-mind complex, we're just going to naturally, you asked about the natural way of kind of renouncing, but that's the natural way. Is that the closer you come, the way that Sri Ramakrishna would put it is, the farther you go to the east, naturally you're going to be moving away from the west, right? Right? The more you move in one direction, the more you move away from the other. So that's what happens. The more you start identifying with your soul rather than the body-mind complex, the more you're naturally going to be interested in what gratifies the soul rather than what gratifies the body and the mind. That's the idea. So that all falls under the second doctrine. Third doctrine?
Liberation.
Yeah, the goal of life, exactly. What's the goal of life? Liberation from all suffering. And what's the only way to achieve that? Through direct experiential knowledge of the infinite divine. Now, does that mean we have to experience the divine as Ganesha and Kali and as Christ and as Allah? No. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, if you want to touch the Ganga, that doesn't mean you have to run your finger from where the Ganga starts all the way down to where it goes into the Indian Ocean. No, you touch it at any point, you've touched the Ganga. Likewise, if you realize God in any form or aspect, you've realized God and you've attained liberation. And there are some unique saints, great souls, who realize God in multiple aspects or forms. Okay, you can, like, some have realized God as Christ and as Allah and as Krishna, but those are rare, and you don't have to. That's not mandatory. So you can, if you realize God in the form that you love most, that's it. That's all you need.
This is one of Yogananda's principle. Like you learn through direct intuitive experience of God or something like this, right?
I mean, this is fundamental to Hinduism in general. It's not. That's what I'm saying. Is that any non-sectarian Hindu should believe these things, in my opinion. I wanted to mention that when I gave a version of this talk in one of our other centers, it kind of went semi-viral, and then on YouTube. And then one of the YouTube comments, a white guy says, "I've always felt weird calling myself a Hindu since I'm white. Usually just say devotee of Ramakrishna. But if it's all right to say I'm a Hindu, I definitely will from now on." So this is really important. One of the payoffs of this whole discussion today, I hope, is that it's a mistake to think that Hinduism is an ethnic religion. Okay, I think this is really important. See, it's not a proselytizing religion. Christianity is a proselytizing religion. Islam is a proselytizing religion. What does that mean? They want to convert. I'm not criticizing them, but it's just a fact that they want to convert. They would love to see the whole world following their religion. Right? Many of them, most. I don't want to say all, but many. Okay. Hinduism doesn't proselytize. And so what people think is because it doesn't proselytize, it can't be universal. And, therefore it's only if you have brown skin and you're born in India, you count as Hindu. And even then you may not be Hindu, right? But I think that's a serious mistake. And that's why this white guy feels like, well, why, can I really call myself Hindu? And when I gave these 4 principles, he's like, yeah, but I believe these 4 principles. So does that make me Hindu? Yes. If you accept these 4 principles, you are Hindu. Look at that. Doesn't matter whether you're white or brown or black or yellow. You're Hindu, right? This is really important. And I think it's important for Hindus not to project or teach their religion as an ethnic religion, right? And that's why I think it's so important that non-Indians also come to these things, and that they also, you talk about the principles, because then when they say like, oh yeah, those principles make sense to me, then you say, then you're a Hindu, right? You don't need to accept anything more to be a Hindu, in my opinion. Now, I wanted to add Hinduism plus, and then we can wrap it up. Okay, what are these 2 mystery doctrines that I tack on to? These are not essential to being Hindu. So the 4 mandatory doctrines for non-sectarian Hinduism are those 4 that I just gave you, which you all know. Hinduism plus are 2 extra doctrines which I think are helpful to believe in as Hindus, but are not mandatory. What are they? Can you guess?
Is reincarnation part of the 4th thing?
Living karma.
Good, yeah. Yes, karma and rebirth is it's like number 5. Karma and rebirth together, I include as, okay. So, I've got a whole book on this, which we talked about. Okay, so you can read it if you're interested. We reap what we sow. That's the fundamental point of this doctrine of karma. It really helps. And then combining that with rebirth, why does it help? It helps in many ways. Just it kind of colors the way we look at ourselves, look at the world, look at other people, interact with other people. We think about ourselves and other people as souls rather than as body-mind complexes. We stop fearing death, for instance. These are all just direct practical implications of the doctrines of karma and rebirth. We don't obsess about this one lifetime, thinking that this is the be-all and the end-all. No, our spiritual journey is a journey of many lifetimes. We'll make some progress in this life. If we don't get liberation, not the end of the world. We're going to come back again with that much in our bank account, and then we'll start where we left off, right? So these kinds of things. So that's why I think that's useful to believe in karma and rebirth. Do you have to be a Hindu? No. And there are many Hindus who, I don't know many, but I've met a number who say that I have a hard time swallowing these doctrines. Don't swallow them. If it causes indigestion, don't worry about it. But be open-minded about it. In fact, one of Sri Ramakrishna's household disciples, named M, who's the author of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, Mahendranath Gupta, he was very rationalistic and was kind of Western educated in British colonial India. And so he asked Sri Ramakrishna, is it okay? Will it harm my faith if I don't believe in past life samskaras, this idea of rebirth? He says, no, don't worry about it. But never for a moment say that your view alone is right and that everybody else is wrong. So what's he saying? Keep an open mind. And then lo and behold, what happened? After some time, he accepted karma and rebirth, right? And so I think it's fine not to believe in them. Be open-minded. Be open to changing your mind later. I think that's the healthy attitude. And then the sixth mystery. So there's a second Hinduism plus doctrine. What do you think that might be? Guess. Or what would you like to be? It's non-mandatory but helpful. I say, this is just my suggestion, the doctrine of caste in its original sense. Notice I say it in its original sense.
Varnashrama.
Huh?
Varnashrama.
Varnashrama, yeah. But this varna, the term varna here is really important. Okay. I already mentioned, in the Bhagavad Gita you find this stated very explicitly. Caste is not based on heredity, it's based on guna and karma, your innate qualities and your behavior in the world. Let me read you something from the Mahabharata. This is from 13.143.50. Not birth, not initiation, not Veda knowledge, not even lineage cause a person to be twice born, meaning the three upper castes. The only cause is behavior. And it's explicitly contrasting the hereditary understanding of caste with the guna and karma based version of caste. Another quotation from the Mahabharata, 3.180.21. Truth, generosity, patience, good conduct, harmlessness, austerity, compassion. Where these are found, that person is said to be a Brahmana, belonging to the highest caste. Notice that these are spiritual and ethical qualities. If you have them, you're a Brahmin. If you don't have them, even if you're hereditarily a Brahmin, you're not really a Brahmin. Okay. Now, why do I say that, even if that's true, why is it helpful to us? Well, just think about it. We're all sitting at a university now. Don't you guys have career counselors? You probably do, right?
Do we?
I don't know.
Do you undergrads have them?
Do you? You don't?
Supposedly.
I've never
Wow.
met one.
Budget cuts, huh? Poor guys. Okay, anyway, we had them, as far as I remember, when I was at Berkeley. I didn't use one, but
Oh, they must be there, yeah.
you would think that they're floating around somewhere. Maybe they'll replace it with AI career counselors. Anyway, here's the thing. Gita says, each of us has a swadharma. We have our own law of being. And we need to discover what that is. That really helps us. What's our calling? What's our vocation? What are we called to do in this lifetime? What's the way that we can uniquely serve the divine? If we can discover that and we find a calling in alignment with our swadharma, what happens? We benefit ourselves spiritually at an individual level, and we can benefit society, right? If somebody who is inclined to practice medicine is enabled by their society to practice medicine, it'll be a well-functioning society, and they're going to make maximal spiritual progress. Do you see what I mean? So in that regard, I think this is very helpful to understand this idea of swadharma in the Bhagavad Gita, and that spiritual life is about, first of all, understanding what is our swadharma, and then carving out a spiritual path, a spiritual practice, and a lifestyle that's in alignment with our core swadharma. And each one will be different. Your swadharma is different from his, and it's different from yours, and different from him, right? But we're all Hindus. So each of us will be practicing Hinduism in a different way. We'll make Hinduism our own. We'll carve out our own individualized kind of spiritual practice based on our swadharma. That's how I see it. Okay? Any questions? Doubts? Challenges? No? I'm looking at you. Usually you come up with some tricky ones. Yeah? We're good?
Do you
I'll bring the business cards. You guys are good. And you remember the 4 principles. I'll bring those business cards, give them to you next time. Just remind me if I forget. Yeah.
Do you view 5 and 6 as like stemming from 1 through 4, or are they kind of, do they add independent dimension?
I mean, they're linked. I mean, in the way that. One thing I didn't mention, but I mean, this could go on. This is actually like 2 hours of material that I kind of skipped some of the stuff. But see, you might ask, because you asked a question about tradition versus something else. But see, these principles I gave you, I will argue that these are profoundly traditional. Now, if you ask me where are they? I want, like, if you just go to the Upanishads, I told you, Rig Veda, Ekam Sad Vipra Bahoda Vadanti, for instance. You'll find in the Bhagavad Gita, Ye Tamam Prapattante Tam Sthavi Bhajamyaham, which means what? That I meet the worshipper in the form that they like to think of me, for instance. And you'll find scriptural verses to support mantras, to support each one of these four tenets, basically. Okay, in that sense, traditional. But what happened is, in the course of time, these non-sectarian Vedantic scriptures, the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutra, ended up getting, they got interpreted by different sects, different philosophical traditions, different sects of Hinduism, in a sectarian manner. So Shankara interprets the Upanishads and Gita and the Brahma Sutra in a narrower kind of Advaitic framework. The Bhakti schools interpret the scriptures in their narrow Bhakti frameworks. And they kind of narrow the teachings of the scriptures into a more sectarian mold. Do you see what I mean?
So your view is kind of that do not try to interpret, just look at what is there and then fill in the gaps for you only?
No, not exactly that, because I feel like when you read the act of reading involves interpretation. You have to interpret. But what I'm suggesting is, let's try to interpret these non-sectarian scriptures in a non-sectarian spirit. That's what I'm suggesting. Is that, now you might ask, well, how do you know they're non-sectarian? So that, again, go to the scriptures and decide for yourself. You might decide that they actually do, like ISKCON, if you look at Prabhupada, the way that he interprets Krishna and the Gita is actually pretty sectarian, in my opinion. And this is not even a criticism, but it's pretty narrow. He's like, Krishna is higher than the other gods. That's the way that he interprets Krishna and the Gita. Now, is that the right way? I don't think so. I mean, I would prefer a more non-sectarian way of thinking about it. I would suggest that it's actually contextually more justified to interpret Krishna in this broader non-sectarian way. If you look at all 700 other shlokas and put them all together, I think that we don't find the sectarian spirit that we find in Prabhupada's interpretation. That's just one example. But I also don't think that Shankara's Advaitic sectarian interpretation is also an accurate way to read Krishna and Brahman. We just talked about in our class, I taught Gita yesterday at Hollywood, and we're on chapter 7. And in a verse which talks about Tesham Jnani Nityukta Eka Bhakti Dvisheshe, it's talking about a Jnani who has Eka Bhakti. Eka Bhakti, one-pointed devotion. You know how Shankara interprets Eka Bhakti? One who is devoted to the Atman, the non-dual Atman. so he turns Bhakti into Jnana again, right? Now, I think this is clearly text torturing. Yeah. Good thing Shabarish isn't here. So. Yeah.
So Hinduism is still like the oldest. It is the oldest religion, and something
Maybe,
that
again,
has survived or resisted a lot of persecutions
Yeah.
throughout the life. Do you think it is because of? I believe it is strongly because of the cultural Hinduism, even though like spiritual is important. I feel like because the culture or the traditions were so strong. Even though it is superstitious or not, that is what kept us going, or is keeping us going.
So they're completely the opposite.
Yeah, I'm not. Listen, let me. Because you asked this, I think it's a great question. I skipped this part, but let me read it to you. I find this fascinating. Swami Medhananda in 1894, he found a passage in a book by Sir Monier Williams. Have any of you heard of him? Because he wrote a famous Sanskrit-English dictionary, which is still used. Monier Williams. He was a professor at Oxford, professor of Sanskrit at Oxford University. He's a hardcore Christian fundamentalist. And Swamiji comes and he goes, here I find a quote. This is in Swami Vivekananda's letter from 1894. Here I find a quotation from a speech by Sir Monier Williams, professor of Sanskrit in the Oxford University. It is very strange as coming from one who every day expects to see the whole of India converted to Christianity. And he quotes him. Listen to the quote, because I see this Christian missionary realizing that the reason why Hinduism is so powerful and so broad and so universal, and why Christian missionaries keep failing in converting them, is because of these spiritual principles that I just explained to you. He says, and yet it is a remarkable characteristic of Hinduism that it neither requires nor attempts to make converts. So it's not a proselytizing religion. Nor is it at present by any means decreasing in numbers. Nor is it being driven out of the field by two such proselytizing religions as Mohammedanism, meaning Islam, and Christianity. On the contrary, it is at present rapidly increasing. And far more remarkable than this is that it is all receptive, all embracing, and all comprehensive. Notice, this is like an advertisement for non-sectarian spiritual Hinduism. given by a Christian missionary. See, an enemy knows us better than we, you know what I mean? These enemies really understand every nook and cranny. So he says, it claims to be the one religion of humanity, of human nature, of the entire world. It cares not to oppose the progress of Christianity nor of any other religion, for it has no difficulty in including all other religions within its all-embracing arms and ever-widening fold. And in real fact, Hinduism has something to offer, which is suited to all minds. See the advertisement? It keeps going.
Yeah.
Its very strength lies in its infinite adaptability to the infinite diversity of human characters and human tendencies. It has its highly spiritual and abstract side, suited to the philosophical higher classes. Which yoga does that correspond to? Hello. It has its highly spiritual and abstract side, suited to the philosophical Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge. Its practical and concrete side, suited to the man of affairs and the man of the world. Karma Yoga. Its aesthetic and ceremonial side, suited to the man of poetic feeling and imagination.
Bhakti Yoga.
Bhakti Yoga. Its quiescent and contemplative side, suited to the man of peace and lover of seclusion. Look at we got this enemy of Hinduism, this fundamentalist Christian professor of Sanskrit who wants to see all the heathen Hindus convert to Christianity, praising Hinduism to the skies and recognizing its universality and broadness. Yeah, do you have a question? Oh yeah. It's remarkable. This is such a remarkable statement. I mean, it's amazing. This enemy, and then he says, Swamiji says, Vivekananda says, this, as coming from one of the staunchest defenders of Christianity, is wonderful indeed. But he seems to have got the idea quite correct. So, this is the answer, is that I think that the real reason why Hinduism still survives is because of those core spiritual principles.
Yeah, what I was going for is like, I think we have discussed this before, I can say it again. Like, for example, there might be this deity in some corner of,
Right.
some South Indian village.
Yeah.
And instead of saying that you are a separate religion, we accepted it to be a part of, they said, oh, this Kali, or this looks like Kali,
Right.
this should be avatar of Parvati.
But that's not cultural Hinduism, that's spiritual Hinduism. That's the first principle, polymorphic monism.
Yeah.
We see Christ. That's literally what happened. The Christian missionaries came to India. Hindus said, wow, we love your Christ. And then the Christian says, okay, great, so now be Christian. They're like, no, but we'll stay Hindu. That's polymorphic monism.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, but that's spiritual Hinduism. That's not the cultural
But then
Hinduism.
also this traditions of that is followed in that religion, that village was adopted by Hinduism rather
Could
than
be.
strictly saying
As I
that
said,
you have
this is
to
really
follow.
important to keep in mind. Once you accept the 4 core spiritual principles of Hinduism, that doesn't mean you stop waving the lamps at the image.
Mm.
You continue to do it, but knowing the spiritual basis of the practice you're doing. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Do you think the cultural side at least provides an accessible entry point for like a young kid or something who?
yeah, although even a young kids aren't dumb, right? So I think that you should tell the young kids these 4 spiritual principles and then say, now come to puja.
Okay.
That's all I just want.
Just informing.
Informing. Just say like, hey, here are the different stages in the process.
Right.
This is called prana pratishtha, where we're not just worshiping clay. Don't think we're worshiping clay. We're invoking the deity in the image for that time period, and then we have an immersion to signify that deity will go back into our hearts. And we just had Kali immersion last week, and we went to Newport Beach, and we immersed Kali in Pacific Ocean. It was really beautiful. Right, and that's the idea, is that you have to understand what is it. If you just think that it's a fun time and you're dunking, throwing an image in the water, this gets weird. But the moment you understand the deeper significance, which is that deity was invoked in the image, we had a very holy puja for that time, and she was with us for that time, and now she's going into our hearts. She's our antaryami. She's within the hearts of everybody, which means she doesn't disappear, but now it's no longer in the image. Simple. Yeah, thank you everyone, that was great. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat.